Came home early and overheard my girlfriend bragging about cheating. Now she's desperate to find me, but I vanished without a trace. At 38 years old, I just had my world turned upside down. I found out my girlfriend Rachel, 36, cheated on me, and to make matters worse, I learned about it in the most gut-wrenching way possible. A little about me first: I've never been married, and I don't have kids. It's not that I don't want those things, life just hasn't lined up that way for me yet. But I always figured I'd get there eventually. Anyway, here's how it all went down. Last Friday, after work, I left town for a weekend getaway with the guys. We do this every few months: head up to one of my buddies' cabins by the lake, spend the weekend fishing, drinking, and just unwinding. It's nothing wild, just a chance to escape the daily grind and give our girlfriends a little break from us. Usually, I stay the whole weekend and head straight to work from there on Monday morning. But this time, I messed up. I'd left my laptop back at the house in the office, and I needed it for work. Around 4 p.m., I packed up early and hit the road, figuring I'd be home by 6. I assumed Rachel wouldn't have eaten yet, so I called in an order from our favorite Italian spot, picked it up, and headed home. Everything seemed normal when I walked in. I could hear Rachel in the kitchen, laughing as she talked on the phone. I thought I'd surprise her, just walk in with dinner and make her smile. But the closer I got, the clearer her conversation became, and in an instant, my whole life came crashing down. At first, I figured she was chatting with her sister or maybe one of her friends. But then I heard the words that tore me apart. "Last night was just amazing. He was such a considerate lover." A pause. "I'm telling you, I've never had anything like it." Another pause. "We met on Tinder, and he took me out last night. By the time we got through the door, we barely made it to the sofa." And then came the line that broke me. "Oh God. Big, like, twice as big as my name. And then, I'm definitely taking him for another test drive." I didn't even think. My hands went numb, and the takeout bag slipped right out of my grip, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Rachel must have heard it because she turned around, her face shifting from laughter to sheer panic. By then, my eyes were already welling up. She scrambled to hang up the phone, reaching out for me, but I just shoved past her. I didn't say a word. I went straight upstairs, grabbed my laptop, and walked out the door. That was 4 days ago. Since then, Rachel has been blowing up my phone calls, texts, everything. I haven't answered a single one. I packed a bag and checked into a motel a couple of towns over, making sure she wouldn't be able to track me down. Even my buddies and my mom have been calling, saying Rachel is frantically trying to find me, but I've assured them I'm okay. Well, physically, anyway. Mentally, I feel like my life just collapsed under me. I really thought Rachel was the one. I was planning to propose to her this 4th of July. It would have been our 6-year anniversary. The ring is already bought. My buddy and his wife, the ones who introduced us, even knew about the plan. They were going to host the cookout where I'd pop the question. And now, I don't even know what to do. This is my first time dealing with cheating in a relationship, and I feel completely lost. Do I even bother hearing Rachel out? Should I let her explain? The thought of her voice makes me sick. I appreciate any advice you all can give. Update 1. Hey everyone, first off, thank you. I didn't have it in me to reply to all your comments, but I read them. And honestly, they got me through the worst week of my life. Here's where things stand now. Last Friday, my buddies showed up at the motel, and I told them everything. They were just as stunned as I was. They asked if I had seen any signs, and the truth is, I hadn't. Not a single one. I also told my best friend that the proposal was off. He completely understood. One thing I made sure of was that my friends turned off their phone tracking before leaving their houses. I didn't want Rachel using one of their wives to figure out where I was. She's close with one of them, and I wasn't taking any chances. That night, I hit the hotel bar hard. Shot after shot. My friends stuck by me, though. Their phones were ringing all night with calls from their girlfriends, but to their credit, they held strong. They just told them we were safe and not to worry. At one point, one of the wives asked to talk to me, saying Rachel was freaking out and wanted me to come home. I just shook my head and told my buddy to handle it. I had nothing to say. I won't lie, I spent most of the night hitting on the bartender, and I even chatted up a couple of women who were in town for work. Not my finest moment, but at that point, I was just trying to numb everything. By the next day, my friends headed home, and I was left with the reality of what came next. This week, I had one of my buddies swing by the house. Since our schedules are predictable, I knew when Rachel would be at work, and I wanted to make sure she had gone back before I showed up. She had taken Monday and Tuesday off, but by Wednesday, she was back at the office. The second I got the confirmation, I went to the house and started packing up my stuff. When I stepped back into the house, it looked like a tornado had ripped through it. Dishes piled up in the sink, clothes scattered everywhere, and the trash overflowing with takeout containers and delivery bags. It was clear Rachel hadn't been too concerned with cleaning up. It took me about 3.5 hours to pack up all my stuff. Before I walked out that door for the last time, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I cleaned up the mess. I don't even know why. Maybe it was just one last thing I could do for her, a parting gesture. That afternoon and into the evening, my phone wouldn't stop blowing up. The second Rachel realized I had come home and cleared out my things, she went into full panic mode, text after text, call after call. I ignored every single one. For now, I'm crashing at my mom's place until I can find somewhere permanent this fall. When I spoke to the landlord, he told me that unless Rachel also signed off, he couldn't remove me from the lease. That means I'm on the hook for my half of the rent until October. Not much I can do about it. Mom has been kind enough to let me stay with her in the meantime. Yeah, I know. A 38-year-old moving back in with his mother, life is really treating me great these days. By Thursday, I finally broke the silence and reached out to Rachel. I told her we could meet up, but it had to be at a neutral place, a bar and grill downtown. I also let her know one of my buddies would be there with me, just to make sure everything stayed civil. She wasn't happy about that. She wanted me to come home and have a real talk so we could move past this. I shut that down immediately. If she wanted to see me, this was how it was going to happen. Eventually, she caved and agreed. So, Friday night rolled around. My buddy and I had already been at the bar for about an hour by the time she walked in. I'd had a meal and taken a couple of shots of Ciroc, just enough to calm my nerves. She sat down, trying to make small talk, asking how I was doing, acting like none of this had happened. I cut her off right then and there. I told her I had questions, and I expected straight answers. Her eyes immediately welled up. The first thing I asked was how long this had been going on. She swore up and down that it was a one-time mistake, the first and only time she had ever done anything like this. I called bullshit. I told her straight up I wasn't here to reconcile. There was zero chance we were ever getting back together. I just wanted the truth so I could have my closure and move on. She tried to hold her ground at first, but after a few minutes, just like many of you predicted, she finally admitted the truth. For the past 2 years, every time I went on one of my guys' trips, she assumed I was cheating on her. So, in her words, she had her fun too. That set me off. I told her she wasn't evening the score, she was just using that as an excuse to sleep around. Then I asked her the question that had been burning in my mind since the moment I overheard that phone call. Who were you talking to? She refused to answer. I asked if they had used protection. She hesitated and then admitted, sometimes. I let out a bitter laugh. I told her she was lucky, I had already gotten an STD test, and I was clean. So at least she didn't have to worry about me giving her anything, unless, of course, the last guy she slept with wasn't as careful. Before I left, I dropped one last bomb on her. I pulled out the ring. I told her about my plans for the 4th of July. How I had been planning to propose at our friend's cookout, the same place where we first met. That's when she finally broke. She started crying, begging me for another chance. I told her I would always love the version of her that I thought was real. But that version doesn't exist. We are done. She's been messaging me nonstop ever since. I'll be blocking her soon. Right now, I'm sitting in a Buffalo Wild Wings, drinking a beer, watching the fights. Hoping Poirier pulls through, but I'm not feeling confident. Honestly, my life is a complete train wreck. Thanks for listening, guys. I don't know if I'll update again, doubt I'll ever talk to that. See you next Tuesday again. Update 2. Hey everyone, I just wanted to say thanks again. Your support means more than you know. Nothing major has happened, but here are a few quick updates. 1. Rachel is no longer invited to the 4th of July cookout. The wife who hosts it, the one who tried to get me to talk to Rachel at the bar, had been told Rachel only cheated once. When I filled her in on the full story, she lost it. She immediately called Rachel, who confirmed everything. After that, she told Rachel she wasn't welcome at the event anymore. 2. That wife apologized to me. She told me she had no idea how bad it was and asked for forgiveness. I told her there was nothing to forgive, we were both just fed lies by someone we trusted. 3. I still don't know who was on the other end of that phone call. My best guess? Her sister. 2 of the wives who were close to Rachel swear they had no clue she was cheating. Apparently, every time we were away, they would have a little girls' night at my house, drink wine, and just gossip. One of them, who isn't even close with Rachel, confirmed that nothing seemed off. For, her sister isn't talking to me. I've tried reaching out to her 3 times. No response. No calls, no texts, nothing. Rachel's mom called me today. She was upset about the breakup and wanted to know if there was anything they could do to change my mind. I didn't sugarcoat it, I told her straight up that wasn't happening. There's no coming back from what Rachel did. After taking the previous week off, I finally went back to work on Monday. Trying to slip back into my normal routine, keep my mind occupied. No more drowning myself in booze either, my liver could use the break. I just wanted to take a moment to thank this community. You've all helped me more than you know. I don't think I'll be updating this account again, though. At this point, the situation is done and dusted. Oh, and Rachel? Blocked. On everything. She has no way of reaching me now. I did hear from the friend who hosts the 4th of July cookout. She told me Rachel isn't doing well, which she mentioned before she knew the whole truth. But you know what? I'm not doing great either. The difference is, I'm choosing to move forward. I refuse to let this define me. So yeah, that's it. Thanks again, everyone. You all rock. Now, on to the next story. I worked hard for my wife, took care of our kid, and made sure the house was always in order. Meanwhile, she came home late every night until one day, I followed her. That's when I found out she was cheating. How we met. My wife and I were married for 4 years. The first time we met was at a football stadium. I had gone out with a few friends to support my team, and she was there with her family. At one point during the game, she pulled out her phone to snap a picture. I just so happened to be sitting a row behind her, and without even thinking, I flashed the goofiest grin right as she clicked the shot. I figured she'd be annoyed that I ruined her moment, but instead, she laughed. She even asked if she could send me the pictures. That's how it all started. After that, we exchanged numbers and added each other on Facebook. We didn't talk much at first, but one day, out of the blue, she messaged me. What started as a casual conversation, just a few random questions, gradually became something more. We got to know each other on a deeper level, and before long, I realized how much I enjoyed talking to her. She was full of energy, always fun to chat with, and just had this light about her. A few weeks in, I asked her out on a date. She said yes. That first date? Perfect. One date led to another, then another, and before I knew it, I was in love. I had been badly burned in my last relationship, so bad that I buried myself in work and swore off dating for a while. But with her, it was different. She made me feel safe. She made me feel wanted. Eventually, we got married. Marriage and parenthood. From the very beginning, my wife made it clear that she wanted kids. I wasn't in a rush, but she was already 2 months pregnant by the time we got married. Seeing how happy she was about it, I didn't object. When our daughter was born, my whole world changed. She was everything to me. She made me want to be a better man, a better husband, a better father. Because I worked from home, I spent the most time with her. I took her to daycare, picked her up, and handled most of the day-to-day parenting. My wife, being a nurse, had an unpredictable schedule. The only time she really got to spend with our daughter was on her days off. And since I was already home, I took care of the house too. I cleaned, did the laundry, and even cooked on some nights. Not just because I liked to clean home, but because I knew how exhausted my wife was after long shifts. I didn't want her to come home and still have to worry about chores. For the first 3 years, everything felt good. We had our usual couple disagreements, but nothing serious. We were happy. We were raising our daughter together. Life was steady. Then, in our 4th year of marriage, everything changed. The red flags start showing. It started small. My wife would come home later than usual. At first, she had excuses, covering for a sick coworker, working overtime. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? But then, it became a pattern. She wasn't just coming home late anymore. She wasn't coming home at all. If she was scheduled for an afternoon shift, she'd tell me she had to stay overnight, claiming she got called in last minute. At first, I tried to be understanding. I knew hospitals could be unpredictable. But when it started happening constantly, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Our daughter started asking where her mom was. I found myself making up excuses just so she wouldn't feel abandoned. And then, there was our intimacy, or lack of it. She barely let me touch her. Anytime I tried to initiate something, she had an excuse. Too tired. Not in the mood. Stressed from work. Weeks passed. Then months. I tried to talk to her about it. I even signed us up for marriage counseling, desperate to get things back on track. She never showed up for a single session. Reality hits me. I finally confided in a close friend. He told me what I had been trying to avoid: either she was seeing someone else, or she was done with our marriage. I refused to believe it. I argued with him, convinced she was just working herself to the bone for the sake of our family. I trusted my wife. The idea of her cheating never even crossed my mind. But the more I thought about it, the more things stopped making sense. Whenever I tried bringing up our relationship, she shut down. If I asked her if something was wrong, she acted like I was being ridiculous. She had completely checked out, and I was the only one trying to hold everything together. And then, little things started adding up. Before, she used to go grocery shopping in sweatpants and a messy bun. At first, I didn't think much of it. My wife had always been pretty casual when going out. Honestly, I used to joke that she looked homeless half the time. I had complained about it for years, asking her to put in a little effort when she went outside. So when she suddenly started dressing better, putting on light makeup, and even layering 2 or 3 different perfumes just to go grocery shopping, I chalked it up to her finally listening to me. I should have questioned it sooner. One evening, I was in the kitchen making dinner while she played with our daughter in the living room. Everything seemed normal until her phone rang. I figured she'd answer it right there like she always did. But instead, she jumped up, grabbed her phone, and rushed outside. That had never happened before. In over 2 years of dating and 4+ years of marriage, my wife had never left the room to take a call. Not once. I knew something was off. Curiosity got the better of me, so I stepped closer to the open door. I didn't go outside, but I stood just close enough to hear most of her conversation. Though I couldn't make out everything, what I did hear was enough to set off alarm bells in my head. Before she came back inside, I quickly moved back to the kitchen, pretending I hadn't noticed a thing. She walked in cool as ever, no tension, no guilt, no sign that anything was out of the ordinary. She played with our daughter for a bit and then casually turned to me, asking what groceries we needed. I rattled off a few things, and she made a list like it was any other day. Then she dropped the bomb. "I'll just go grab them now since I'm not doing anything," she said. I didn't need a psychic to tell me something wasn't right. Her entire demeanor screamed giddy. She wasn't just heading to the grocery store, she was excited about it. I watched as she disappeared into our room, took a shower, changed into fresh clothes, and carefully applied light makeup, just enough to enhance her features but not enough to make it obvious she was dressing up for someone. For months, we hadn't had a real conversation. We hadn't been intimate. She had been cold and distant with me. But suddenly, she was all dressed up for grocery shopping? As soon as she left, I asked my neighbor if his oldest daughter could watch my little one for a few minutes. He agreed without hesitation, and the second I had the green light, I grabbed my keys and drove to the grocery store. I pulled into the parking lot and waited. I wanted to believe I was wrong, that I was just being paranoid. But after sitting there for a few minutes, I saw her. And I saw him. She wasn't inside shopping. She was walking out, arm wrapped around some guy's waist while his hands draped over her shoulder. I saw them through the see-through glass, my wife giggling like a teenager in love. Something in me snapped. I was boiling. Before they even made it out of the store, I was already charging inside, pure rage pushing me forward. She froze when she saw me. She didn't know what to do, didn't know what to say. I didn't even waste my breath on her. I turned straight to the guy she had been sneaking around with, my voice booming as I ripped into him. I was loud, and I made a scene. People stopped to watch. Some even pulled out their phones, recording the entire thing. I didn't care. I was too angry to be embarrassed. By the time I was done humiliating him, the whole store knew exactly what kind of man he was. His manager found out about the affair, and by the end of the week, he was fired. As for my wife, she came home that night, begging and crying, pleading for another chance. But her excuse? That was the worst part. She admitted she had been seeing him for over 6 months. That all those nights she stayed late at work or covered for a sick friend were lies. She wasn't working overtime. She was spending the night in his bed while I sat at home taking care of our daughter alone. And the reason she did it? She thought she could get away with it, that she could have her fun and then just come back to me when she was ready. That hurt more than the betrayal itself. That night, I kicked her out of the house. She ended up crashing at a friend's place. There's no need to ask whether we got divorced, because we did. There was no forgiving this. She destroyed our family while I was breaking my back trying to be a good husband and father. The only silver lining in all of this? I won full custody of our daughter. Since she was barely around in the first place, the court ruled that it was in our daughter's best interest to stay with me. It's been over a year now, and while the pain hasn't gone away, I've learned to live with it. The betrayal still lingers, but I refuse to let it define me. Right now, my daughter is my top priority. I'll raise her to be strong, to be kind, and most importantly, to be faithful to whoever she ends up with one day. Because no one deserves to go through what I did.